Welcome everyone to Therapeutic Astrology Podcast with me, Mana, and today also with, I guess, two other wild women. We're going to speak about Lilith Untamed because there is a new book out, and it is by my guest today, Christina Rodenbeck. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi. Oh man, so Lilith, we know her maybe as Adam's first wife, and my intention today is to dive deeper into the understanding of her as an archetype, also historically, because your book goes into that. The book begins with, I love this, we humans are a mixture. We are a mixture, civilized and wild, tamed and untamed, raw and refined, more and less. So, what do you think about this introduction that you wanted to say that we all have it in us?
Yeah, I wanted to say that we all have it in us. And to understand astrology at all, you have to understand that all of these archetypes are inside us. We are reflecting what above, we are reflecting the above. As above, so below, um, is an essential understanding of astrology. And this means that we have difficult aspects to ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we can understand those, you never solve all of your problems, you know that, but you can at least be honest and
Mm.
encounter them. And it is really enriching to look at your shadow. Um, and also that the things that we label as shadow or as difficult or dark are not necessarily that. So we have this
Yeah.
habit of saying, oh, this is the shadow and this is the light. It's not like that. It's complex. It's mixed. We're mixed. We're not one or the other. So I think one of the things that I wanted to, Lilith is a part of ourselves. And it's an archetype that has been suppressed. Yeah, it's also I wanted to make sure that people understood this in men and women. It's not we overgender things as well. We tend to give things
Mm.
genders. Say this is a female thing, this is a male thing, when
Yeah.
actually we all have everything inside of us, right? So and we express it in different ways. So Lilith, of course, it historically and as an archetype, it's a female archetype. I'm putting my that in quotes in my fingers, but that can be very misleading to see it like
Mm.
that. Uh,
Mm.
and also that I'm thinking about that now as I'm speaking. It's always important with any structured way of thinking, such as astrology, to understand where that structure originates, where it comes from, right? Astrology is a wonderful thing. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful way of looking at the world, but it also comes from within patriarchal paradigm, right?
Yeah, because you say, like society itself, astrology has rejected and repressed certain archetypes.
Yeah, I think so. Don't you? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, okay. I get it because we can't really escape the culture we are in. And so it goes hand in hand sometimes with the norms, but I think we shouldn't. I think we should be very aware of that.
Of what's been thrown out or what's suppressed, and it will be a
Mm.
cultural thing. And the
Mm.
idea, it's very interesting when people often think, oh, astrology is this very objective thing. It's not at all, because you're working from inside a culture and inside astrology with
Yeah.
astrology. So of course you have to sort of step back and think, well, what are my biases that I'm bringing to this from my cultural background, and and also what are the biases within astrology that have
Yeah.
always been there. I mean, who's written the books for most of it,
Mm.
right? Who's written the books?
Like men, you mean?
Men, very, very
Ah.
educated, highly privileged men. This is what used to be called in the Middle Ages, what's still called is called learned magic, isn't it? Is
Mm.
that's where astrology comes from, which was the purview, the ground of intellectuals, right? So very privileged, a very
Yeah.
highly privileged people. have written down astrology. And so it's really interesting to just even question that a little bit.
Mm.
How did we get onto this? We've gone sideways. It's very Lilith, but she's taken us sideways already.
No, it's super on point, I think, because it's about what we've rejected. And and so now you're just going into, how could that happen? Well, if the people who wrote the books were not in sync with that archetype. And
Or
and so, mm,
or fearful of that archetype.
all right.
Because one of the things that Lilith represents is what people are afraid of, what
Yeah.
you're afraid of. And that these are deep fears, and they are partly male fears, some of them, like the fear of the women's sexuality is an important part of the Lilith archetype. But also women's fear of death and childbirth is also part of the Lilith archetype. It's those very deep-seated fears around generate the generative powers, um, around creative powers, around sex, around death, certain kinds of death, that where Lilith comes into play. And I say that broadly, but as you know from reading the book, we can be very specific about this in astrology.
Yeah, I mean specific, and also it's a big theme, so I'm glad that you've written this book,
Mm.
because and I also feel like there's not so many books about it. So I
I
mean, so it's simple, but it's a big archetype to narrow down.
Yeah, I wanted to write a book that was useful. That was my first thing with this, because I wanted to write a book that people could use, especially other astrologers, but also just someone who knows no astrology can use this book to really understand it and really pin down what it means for you. Because Lilith, this archetype is, as we know, the archetype, not the same for everybody,
Mm.
right? It's not going to be that working out in the same way. For one person, your Lilith, say you're born with Lilith rising, you may find yourself in a position quite unexpectedly, of being a mistress or being the third person in a relationship. That
Ah,
seems to happen quite frequently, with certain Lilith positions. But other people who have, I don't know, say Lilith in the third house, they just have a very crazy, difficult sister or brother. You know,
ah,
it's not the same for each person.
no.
And that's, as I mean, we know this is true with astrology, and that's why we have the systems of signs and houses, and because they place things, the house
Mm,
will tell you where in your life it happens, and the sign will tell you kind of how it happens.
mhm,
Um, Obviously, and that's true of all of the planets and points, and so to understand something like Lilith, which really hasn't been written about, there are some books in French, I think, and maybe, I don't know if there's some in German, that deal with this, but there's nothing in English really that just deals with it in a very like um, clear astrological way with clear examples of, and so that people can make their own decisions about how it works for them.
And now there is that book, Lilith Untamed. Okay, and so what happens when Lilith is suppressed? You say that when Lilith is suppressed or ignored or put down, she gets angry, sad,
Yeah.
and dangerous. Dangerous. She may burst out violently or wither away, taking your creativity and curiosity with her. And this is why I feel like, I call this therapeutic astrology, because that's what I love doing and looking for exactly what we're talking about here. What happens when we neglect parts of ourselves? And we have to at certain times in our lives to adapt and all of that. But in the long run, she gets angry, for example.
you know, for the individual, for the person who doesn't, if you're not tackling your Lilith, depending on where she falls in your chart, can be really dangerous. If you look at the charts of serial killers, they have a strong Lilith. They have not been letting that's how they let their Lilith out. It's suppressed somehow, this side of them, and it comes out as this violent rage. So and that's a very extreme example, but in an average person's life, there may be places where you find yourself being completely unreasonable or irrational or cruel, that you wouldn't want to be. and it's probably some part of your Lilith acting out. On the other hand, you see it incredibly powerfully in the charts of very creative people. So, I mean, one of my favorite examples of a Lilith type person,
Yeah.
I have quite a lot, but a Lilith
Mm.
type person one is Picasso, right? The
Yeah.
Spanish painter Picasso. Not a very nice man, okay? he, he was not a very nice man, an incredibly productive artist
Mm.
who was painting and drawing and making sculptures and ceramics and got everything all the time from the age of 7 to the age of 95, and had a very vigorous sex life as well, which is also very Lilith. So he's this incredibly creative person. It did sort of hurt the people around him, which is also a Lilith thing. You know, if you're so his Lilith is untamed in that it comes out as this incredible creativity and the artistic production, but also it was not nice to be his partner. And
Mm.
and I think that's really interesting because we like to think of things only working one way or the other, you know. And but for him, he's channeling that Lilith straight out into the world. It comes through him. Another example is Amy Winehouse, the singer, Amy Winehouse, who, you know, you only have to look at her and you think, oh, there's something, or hear her voice, the sound of her voice. That
Mm.
is coming from somewhere very, very deep, right out into the world. And she is digging right down. And her life was incredibly tragic because I think she was overwhelmed by Lilith. You know, she had this too much. She couldn't channel it and keep it under control. She was overwhelmed by that. And she has Lilith on the midheaven, which you see in a lot of people who are performers.
Uh, it reminds me of so many questions that I have for you also in terms of the technical study of this. But just to relate to what you're saying, you have a sentence in your book that Lilith's name has become synonymous with rebellion, freedom, and
Mhm.
embracing the so-called dark, and that Lilith is eternal. And so this is what I'm talking about. This is a big archetype. And it's also interesting to hear you speak, like, in a way, the two examples here are, can we say that they lived out their Lilith well? Or could it have gone in a better way?
With Picasso, I think that he lifted it out really well for him, but not for the women in his life, right? They suffered. You know, I don't know if you know those pictures of Dora Maar crying, you know, it's
Mm,
not great for her. So it worked well for him. And weirdly, you could say, oh, well, it also worked well for the collective because we have all these great works of art, right? Um, Again, with Amy Winehouse, she was the one that suffered, right? The
mm,
collective benefited. Lilith on the midheaven, she's doing it for the collective. She's literally, and one of the other themes sometimes with Lilith is sort of being kind of sacrificed by the mob. You know, she was sacrificed by the mob, Amy
okay.
Winehouse. You know, what happened to her was self-inflicted, obviously, but also it was to do with fame, which is a 10th house issue, a midheaven issue. It's like too much fame, too young.
Mm,
Um, and I think that actually destroyed her. And if she'd had better people around her, it wouldn't have
yeah.
happened. Because, like I said, a lot of rock and rollers have got Lilith in the 10th or ninth. If you start to look at their charts, they are, you know, I'm just thinking of some of the famous sort of guitar heroes and people like that. They have Lilith up there because you need that wildness. I mean, Ozzy Osbourne's another one with very strong Lilith. You need that wildness to excite other people, right? It's exciting to see someone who's acting out Lilith. But
Mm,
if you haven't got like the band around you or a relationship that supports you, then it eats you up.
mm.
Um,
So,
Hopefully this is not a problem most people have to deal with, the being devoured by Lilith, but it can happen.
mm, yeah, I just think it's pretty peculiar, the thinking around was there, is there a better way to live your Lilith out, also emotionally, relationally? She's a wild woman, but even you have a quote like this. I don't remember. Do you remember, Christina? It's, what is it, like, even as stray cats thrive in a home or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So it's like even that part of us also needs to
Yeah.
be in relationship.
Yeah. It does need to be in relationship. And one thing, which is not, I don't deal with that much in the book, but I do notice this in synastry, like when you compare charts of people of successful couples who are still together or find each other, there's often some kind of Lilith connection there. So Lilith is
Okay.
finding a home with the other person sometimes. There's often, like a Moon Lilith conjunction or something. It's curious, and it's that little untamed, like it's the stray cat being stroked and loved and
Mm.
made to feel like it's okay to be. Being irrational is a very kind of part of the Lilith archetype. This is
Mhm.
not some part of you that responds to, you know, rules and language, really. It's beyond that. So it does, but it responds to tenderness, you know, and kindness and
Mm.
being recognized. And I think it's to do with, one of the things that happens. I'm just back to Picasso and Winehouse. Their Liliths are kind of recognized, aren't they, by the collective because they're so prominent. Um, and maybe that was quite a good thing for them too, is to have their Liliths recognized, but difficult. But for many of
Yeah.
us, it has to happen in a private space. You're not
Mhm.
going to want your Lilith waltzing around on a stage if you've got Lilith tucked away, in the sixth. I mean, if you have it in the sixth house, you might end up working with people who are outcasts themselves. And that's an incredibly positive way to work with Lilith. In my book, I have an example of one of my clients who is someone I respect a lot, who is a doula. She's a birth doula. She brings children into the world. And this is one of the places that Lilith works is in, I want to say, in the birth chamber, right? She
Ah,
also works in the death chamber. She's somehow seems to be involved in these liminal spaces coming from, you know, the other side to birth and in the other direction as well. But this woman is a birth doula and she has a Lilith moon conjunction exactly in the first house in Cancer. I mean, what could be more perfect than that?
oh,
And you might
great.
expect that to be difficult. It's not, it's perfect. It works so well. I mean, admittedly, she's not doing it in a kind of traditional setting, right? So she's not a midwife in a hospital.
Okay.
She is a birth doula, so she's doing it in a different way, an
Ah,
alternative way. Um,
which would also relate to this archetype of
yeah,
doing it in a more free way. Yeah.
yeah.
Eh, yeah. Did I interrupt you?
No, and I was just
Okay.
going to say, and helping and helping women to liberate their own Lilith, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, when she had her own baby, she did have to do it. She had to be rushed to hospital.
Okay.
It's fine. It turned out fine, but it was quite
Okay.
ironic.
Yeah. When people want to look up the Lilith, maybe we can talk about practical stuff and then continue with the archetype.
Yeah.
So, because you also, of course, we need to read the book to get all the details, but
Mm.
just some of the thing you, Via Lamia, you call. I haven't heard about that before.
I just made it up.
Oh, you
That's
made it up. Okay.
I just my label because you
Good.
call it something, the Via Lamia. This so Lilith is it's not an actual planet. We know that. I mean, there is an asteroid called Lilith. We're not dealing with that. I'm going to read because it's actually more straightforward. The Black Moon Lilith that most astrologers use is not a planet or an asteroid or a star. It's a mathematical point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That point is it's to do with the orbit of the moon, and it's the apogee. The Lilith favored by astrologers is the apogee of the moon, the point on the moon's orbit that is furthest from the Earth at any given moment. Okay, so that is a mathematical point that can be easily tracked. Okay, and the person who really noted that was Kepler, the great astronomer.
Mm.
He's that there's this point here, that's very interesting that he left it. And the so to find your own Lilith, you don't have to go and get a telescope out and track this. You can just go to a website like Astro.com, which pulls up charts and make sure that it has Black Moon Lilith, okay? But you
Mhm.
want to put in the mean Lilith first. Because this is to do with the orbit of the moon, it wobbles in the same way that the lunar nodes wobble, okay? It's not straight. So there's a mean Lilith and a true Lilith, and the true Lilith wobbles around, and the mean Lilith is steady, like a
Mm.
clock, like the sun and the moon. It goes around tick, tick, tick. And always start with the mean Lilith. Um, that's the one that I really address most of the time in the book. But it's
Okay.
really interesting to look at the true Lilith as well, because there's a space between those two that is lively, right? It's enlivened in a Lilith type way. And I've noticed that some people have, so sometimes that's like no distance at all. It's like 1 degree. And sometimes it's 20 degrees or more, you know? Um, and I've noticed that if you have a very wide, and I call that gap the Via Lamia, because that means the road of Lilith. If you have a wide one or a narrow one, it does not make your Lilith more or less strong. It just means that it manifests in more different ways if you have a wider Via Lamia. And people with a very tight Lilith, um, Via Lamia, I'm just thinking actually another is Radiohead, Tom York, and Radiohead has a Via Lamia like that wide, it's tiny, it's like 3 degrees. And he
Mhm.
has been really focused on being a musician his entire life. You know,
Okay. Yeah.
it gives you a lot of focus, that tightness. But having a wide one gives you a breadth of experience. So both are equally can be equally strong, but they may be kind of different.
Okay, so what we're talking about here is, like you say, it's a mathematical point and it's a point where today you can put it up in your software
Yeah.
and figure out where it is for you in your natal chart. At the same time, we're also talking about a historical archetype. So we're talking about both, right? It's how it shows up, and it's just it's amazing, right? You can actually show up. You can actually look up where it technically would show up for you in your life.
Mhm.
Just want to clarify that this is something this is what we're talking about, and then you have developed this technique of looking at between true and mean Lilith.
Mm.
There's a certain point.
It's just like maybe a number of degrees, and
Mhm.
it's like a road, or a way, right? That is can make, and it may be a narrow road, a narrow path that you follow with that Lilith. Like I was saying, someone like the Radiohead guy, Tom York,
Mhm.
narrow path, or maybe a wide path that Lilith that's affected by Lilith. But essentially, you want to look because your software will say mean Lilith or true Lilith.
Yeah.
Let's start with mean. And in general, I'm looking at the mean Lilith. So when I'm talking about, for example, Amy Winehouse, I'm saying her Lilith is on the midheaven. I mean her mean Lilith, and the same with Picasso.
Mhm.
And throughout the book, that's what I'm generally using. Although I
Mhm.
explain these two, that these 2 points. It's the same with, the nodes of the moon. They move. You can either go with mean or true. Um,
I
but
want to bring that up actually, Christina, because your ambition is that we should acknowledge Lilith as much
yeah,
as the nodes of the moon.
yeah,
And for some astrologers, like evolutionary astrologers, that is, we really do acknowledge the nodes of the moon's effect.
yeah,
So, but you're saying Lilith should be up there, equally significant.
yeah. I think so. Once you start looking at charts, and this is to do with applied astrology, right? So I like astrology that works. It's not Astrology is not interesting when it's just theoretical
Wow.
because you can say anything, right? But when you start to look at charts and apply it to charts and start to look at what the transits do for people. So right now, interestingly enough, we've got, I think Lilith is at where is she? She's at 25 of Sagittarius. She's just at the end of Sagittarius. She's opposite Mars today. So quite interesting. So today is the 5th of August, right? So those two have an encounter
Hmm.
today. And
Yeah.
what happened to me?
What happened to you?
This thing, I was, to cut a very long story short, it's on my moon. Okay, I have a moon in Gemini. Mars is on my moon. Mars is opposite Lilith. I had an encounter with someone in a red BMW, okay, Mars in Gemini, who was like, he was like Andrew Tate. He was covered in tattoos. He was a very frightening man, okay?
Okay.
Really scary, one of these, and very kind of probably on uppers. He was like very agitated. And instead of just sort of going around him, I got out of my car, I walked over to him, and I talked into his window. And he, of course, was just so rude to me. It was incredible. It's actually making me laugh, think about it. But he was like, he swore at me so much with Mars and Gemini. Of course, he swore at me.
Ah,
But I was doing the kind of Lilith thing of thinking,
y-
I'm not taking this, you know.
you
You know,
let her out. You
I,
let your Lilith out.
which was probably at that moment an incredibly bad idea. It was quite
Yeah.
dangerous. He was scary, you know, it was a dangerous thing to do. And that's, folks, this is a bad example of the, you know, using your Lilith energy. It's like,
Like, don't do this at home.
yeah, don't do that. Luckily, it kind of turned out okay. Well, no, it didn't. I just got back in my car and thought, why did I do that? I'll just drive around him. Um, but that's an example, like there's the Lilith transit.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. So it's activating something in you. And yeah, what so and when you read the book, it also comes alive like that. Maybe we could shift into some of the historical parts. Christina, how about that? Um, I mean, there are so many. There is Heinrich Kramer
yeah, oh my
and
God.
the witch hammer.
The witch hammer. I'm looking at the witch hammer. Where is that in there? But you know, when you read, okay, let's go back a little bit. Um, because one, you said something really interesting earlier, which is, isn't it incredible that we have this old archetype and it literally shows up in modern astrology?
Yeah,
And that is the incredible thing about astrology in general. I
it
often think
is.
that about Neptune, which was only discovered in the 1850s. Yet we have a quite a clear understanding of what Neptune means. And it's not exactly the same as the myth, but it's similar. You know, it's like the same flavor, but a little bit different, right? It's like the god of the sea, but kind of not quite. How does it become a mystic? But it does. It works.
Yeah,
We know this.
yeah.
Uh, arc and the same with the planet Uranus, not, you know, discovered quite recently, or Pluto, you know, discovered in the 30s. At around the same time that people started to play around with Lilith, by the way, astrologers started to play around with Lilith. So
Mhm.
we have this ancient archetype and these stories about Lilith, the she demon, you know, um, in the Near East, even in possibly pre-biblical times, there are seem to be some mention of Lily, some kind of demon that's to do with childbirth, and this thread comes through, and then you get to Kramer, who wrote the Witch Hammer,
Mhm.
the Malleus Maleficarum, and he literally describes, and it's, as at the time people were like, this is the crazed fantasies of a man who hates women. Literally at the time, this is what people said.
Uh,
And yet it was this international bestseller across Europe, right? It was the book that was printed, I think, after the Bible, of course, which was the, you know, the most popular book. It was the second most popular book, was The Witch Hammer, which was
it
you.
is. It says 1486 here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in Renaissance Europe, so this was the book that was used during the witch trials and during the witch hunts as a kind of, because although it's like all these things, people start saying this person's crazy and then they end up saying, oh yeah, but we're still going to use his book. But his book is a description of these, some of these labels that Lilith had already for thousands of years. She makes the milk go sour. She has weird sexual relationships with the devil. She um, is to do with abortion. She, all of all those archetypal witch things are literally descriptions of Lilith from earlier on. So they've been taken. And they were taken from them. And we see that story of Lilith, right, come through all, right up to Hammer horror movies. Who is Lilith? It's this archetypal witch is
Yeah.
Lilith,
Yeah.
for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
And he probably had read some of these other descriptions of Lilith, which go back to the Middle Ages a little bit earlier, where Lilith appears in Apocrypha. She's not in the Bible. The Bible doesn't say that Adam had a first wife, right? That's nowhere in there. But there's Apocrypha around that saying that Adam had a first wife. Her name was Lilith. There's references are in the book. Her name was Lilith, and she was in the Garden of Eden, but she didn't want to have sex with him. She didn't want to be underneath him when they were having sex. She wanted to be on top.
Yeah.
Um, Clever woman. And he wanted to be on top. And she wanted to be on top. So they argued about this. And finally God was like, stop it. And she said, I'm not putting up with this. I'm going to go grow leather wings. I'm going to the Red Sea and doing my own thing. You do you, I'll do me. And she left the Garden of Eden and went and set up her own whatever as a demon, got a demon boyfriend, according to some sources. So all these sources are like slightly conflicting about what the story was, but essentially that is like a core story. And that core story, by the way, is supposed to be funny. It's not, it's supposed to be like a joke. How could a woman want to be on top? How we
Oh,
laughed. Um,
how we left.
and but that story was quite well known, you know, even later on. I think so. Goethe refers to it in Faustus. I think he refers
Mm,
to Lilith in Faustus, and then Thomas Mann refers to Lilith as well. So there are these references to Lilith. It's a known story through at least from the Renaissance onwards. Um, and and she becomes very and we're referring to her as she also. So if you think about this also in terms of certain psychoanalytic traditions, right? You can see that that might be how a man would think of her, right?
ah,
I haven't sort of like delved into this that much, but it might be how a man
interesting.
is thinking of her as this other, right? For a woman, Lilith might work out differently.
Yeah.
And even if we're talking about our examples from earlier on of Picasso versus Winehouse, Winehouse gets devoured by her own Lilith, right? It's inside her. It's just a projection for him. He projects it onto the women around him.
Mm. What about Beyonce? Because I remember you have her. Do you remember her chart?
She is so amazing in her changing of character. She has a Moon Lilith conjunction with Uranus. Okay,
Okay. Yeah.
that's fascinating. In the seventh house. So her relationship is really important with Jay-Z. I mean, let's face it, her partnership is really important, but there she is. She's changing from one thing to the next. She changes her costume, she becomes a different, and she is acting out different aspects of Lilith, I think. It's not just the one. I think she does it over and over again. Um, I'm just thinking about her also having she's talked about being betrayed
Mm,
a lot. She's dealt with some of these themes of Lilith, which are about um, jealousy, betrayal, but also being really independent within a
mm.
relationship. So she's an amazing example of actually someone who's taken the Lilith and has used it, is working with it very well,
And
I think.
liberating, yeah, female voices, if you will, for many years have
Oh,
done, yeah, has made a huge contribution to liberating women.
yeah, and I also think that the fact that she has it in Scorpio is that she's fine with being
Yeah.
really super sexy, right? And what I find interesting about her is that how many
I
children does
don't
she
know.
have now?
I don't know. I just,
Ha- Having children, having her kids has not stopped her being super sexy, right? She's a very sexy
mm,
mother, Lilith Moon conjunction in
Good
Scorpio.
stuff. But this,
Yeah.
Christina, this makes me want to ask you about Pluto and Lilith, because you
Uh,
have a chapter on that as well.
okay.
That, yeah, let me.
Pluto and Lilith, I mean, they are the shadow or the dark. They have a bad reputation, don't they? These are the two people with the worst reputation in the in the solar system. The Lord of the Underworld and Lilith, who is like so-called demoness living on the edge of the Red Sea. And they do have quite some similarities because actually he's the Lord and of his domain, and she is the queen of the edge, right? But she is about liminal spaces or edge spaces, right? So that I always think of her on this kind of windswept shoreline, but you think of him down in the depths of Hades, right? He is very associated, I still think, with wealth and what comes from underground, in of course he's associated with death and wealth and regeneration, which is a little bit similar to her in that she is, as I said, very creative, a creative force.
Because like two different kind of powers.
They are different powers, and she's nothing to do with wealth. I mean, I guess I haven't really, I think she might be to do with like spending it if you have it. She doesn't care. She's untamed. She's about the wildness. And she's not about acquisition. She pushes stuff out rather than pulling it in, right? Although she is quite alluring, you'll see also that people who have like Lilith rising are often very attractive.
Ah,
Um, can make you very super attractive, super sexy in a
mm,
way that's mysterious. You think, why is that person who's doesn't not particularly good looking, but everybody wants to be near them. They'll have a
mhm,
Lilith placement.
mhm. That
Um,
attraction magnet.
it's a magnet thing. But they are quite so they are similar in that they're both archetypes that we reject, right? They're rejected.
They're in the shadow somehow.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm sort of slightly hesitant with that word shadow. It's a useful word, but I think we should always caveat it. We should always hesitate as we use it because to talk about shadow and light, what are we?
Mm.
Um
Right now, as I'm looking at you, you're kind of both. You have light across your
just
face.
realized that the sunlight has suddenly come in, hasn't it? I am in light and shadow here. Um
But anyway,
I
there's
feel
there's
good about that. I feel good about the light and the shadow. Uh,
yeah,
but those two archetypes are, I suppose we would say, the shadow ones, or I would say the rejected ones, the ones that we can't
rejected.
deal with,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, are the ones we have trouble dealing with. And
And
also,
the,
go on.
I'm so enthusiastic. It's just that you have this point in the book that Lilith energy is not about truth. And
No.
that is a major difference from Pluto that is about uncovering, the darker material, but it's like wanting truth to get out there.
And I think that's really true about Pluto. And I also feel that Pluto is definitely about the truth. It's about saying uncomfortable truths.
Yeah.
Um, and revealing uncomfortable truths sometimes by accident, you know, about yourself or about the other person. You blurt out the Pluto thing.
Yeah.
Um, Pluto's also about like focus, isn't it? You can feel that it's like a laser beam sometimes. I don't think that Lilith is about truth. This is not the issue. It's too much, there's too much about kind of sensation, and she's dealing with something that's much more kind of outside truth, lies, whatever. That's not her interest, right? Her interest is
Mm.
creativity. Her interest is also, she can sometimes turn up when we have an initiation, like I was saying, from life to death, from to birth, from whatever comes before to birth, but also in
Mm.
these moments of initiation, like starting your first period, maybe a Lilith moment, that kind of, you're initiated into something, you're
Okay.
initiated into adulthood. or you're initiated into your first sexual experience, maybe a Lilith type experience, because you're going outside that boundary, you're breaking that boundary. You know, if you, a an energy that's very, very different to Lilith is Saturn, right? Which is very contained. And so I think that Lilith and Pluto can work very well together, actually. You know, they can be fearsome, you know, because they both of them don't necessarily hold to the value system that the rest of society is holding to. And that's where Saturn comes in and has to contain somehow, has
Mm.
to work with the containment, because Saturn is our friend, right? It stops us from going completely outside. And I also find with Lilith that you do see her in people's charts indicating maybe a mother who was really too crazy or too wild when it's making conjunction to the moon. May I say that my example of the moon conjunction person, the doula, her mother is fantastic, uh,
Yeah.
but foreign. She's not from the same tribe, right? So
Okay.
that's also interesting. So she's come from the outside
Mm.
to this other place.
Mm.
But you know,
Mm.
so Lilith can indicate very crazy or difficult impulses that you have to deal with, not just in yourself, but literally outside you that have affected you.
And can it ever end well?
Yeah, of course it ends. It always ends well. You know, like look at Beyonce,
Yeah, that's right. Just look
you
at
know,
her. Yeah.
her. Um, you know, another example I have in the book of like famous people with big Liliths is Jennifer Aniston, big Lilith, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Huge across the top of her chart.
That's an interesting analysis you make there as well. But you also, because you have just different key points to just figure out what this archetype is, then you also have extraordinary, a prolific talent.
Extraordinary prolific talent. That's why I brought up Winehouse and Picasso. I mean, those people have got extraordinary prolific talent, and so does
Mm.
Beyonce, for goodness sake. You know, she's an extraordinary talent.
Mm.
Um, and you will see it probably maybe on an angle or near an angle with extraordinary prolific talent. When Lilith makes a conjunction to another planet or to an angle, you really see her, she's likely to act out in the chart. And I think for most people, it does work out as something that it can be something you're surprisingly talented at, you know, or that you're able to be less held in around that area of your chart. I mean,
That in itself could be showing up as a talent, just because I think we have so much inhibition. We are
yeah.
holding ourselves back so much, so it never gets cultivated, maybe that talent. So, yeah.
So it's a disinhibiting thing. It's like I have to let this out.
Mm.
I'm still thinking about Beyonce and that Lilith Moon, you know. So I'm so happy that she also had babies, you know. She did all the singing, but she also had babies, and she's also made the having babies part of the show, hasn't
Mm.
she? You know, that's
Mm.
part of her thing is this again, this generative thing.
Mm.
I'm so yes, I think it can be prolific talent,
Mm. Cool,
or
cool.
it's a place where you're talented.
Yeah.
And that's when you can sort of um, align yourself with the Lilith. And then all of these themes that we have, I mean, another one is to do with your relationship with um, children, right? So sometimes Lilith in certain can mean that you don't have children, actually, that there's some issue around it, or that you have a lot, right?
Mm.
So as with many astrological archetypes, you can have it's on an axis of many, many or few, depending in certain
Yeah.
positions.
Yeah.
I'm going to just get that blind down. So
Yeah, sure, do that.
you can cut this very boring bit out.
Yes, I will. I wanted to say that I feel like having two last sections here in our conversation, and the one is about loving your Lilith.
Mm,
And yeah, like finding her in yourself. Y- You say now it's time to look in the mirror at your own Lilith.
mm,
You will never tame her, of course, but you might just make friends with her. And
Mm,
the better you know her, the more you might like her.
yeah.
Can you take us through that? How would we engage with Lilith?
Well, first of all, I would suggest being honest. I would also suggest looking at your astrological chart and really honestly looking at where she falls in your chart, which house this is in, which sign she is in, and how she wants to express herself through the sign, right? That's kind of the way, or the how is the sign, and where she comes in your life most frequently, right? So I
Mm,
would suggest doing that first, and then thinking, how is that in me? What is that in me that how does that work? I can tell you, even for myself, I have Lilith on the descendant in Aquarius, and I like witches, you know. I like to hang out with witches. I like to be with witches. I mean, they may not think of themselves as witches, but I recognize the witches. I like those people. And that's my seventh house Lilith, is who do I want to spend time with? And who am I fascinated by, is those Lilith people. Okay, that's just an example. But you know,
mm,
you might have Lilith in the third house and you might have the same thing. Like um, your sister or your brother may be someone who's really wild or out of control. Or, like I said, sometimes there can be mental health issues with, it can show up people in your family who've had mental health issues. So you may have a very unruly sibling, but and you know this, if you do, you know, be kind, right? Be kind to the Lilith. Don't
mm,
throw her out. Welcome her in,
mm,
and welcome her in you. And it doesn't mean that you have to go and, it's not so much, I mean, a lot is written about the kind of inner wild woman, you know, dark, whatever. It's not quite that, is it? It's more nuanced than that,
mm.
because it's not going to be the same wild woman for everyone. Not all of us want to run around in the woods naked. That's not my thing, you know. It may be yours if you happen to have Lilith and Sagittarius, um, which so many people who started cults have Lilith and Sagittarius. I was amazed by that when I was looking into it. Um, so Alistair, anyway, you can look in the book, but people who had cults, Lilith and Sagittarius. So maybe you
Oh,
want to start a cult if you.
nice. It adds up. That adds up with the Sagittarian energy. But you also have this mention that Lilith sometimes stays silent.
Yeah, not, and you know this as well because you're an astrologer, but not all of our um not all of the planets are loud in our chart. Some are quiet and some are louder. So that you will know some people who are whose Lilith is very, very loud or overwhelming or huge, right?
Mm,
You will know those people. And for you, it may not feel comfortable to let that Lilith out. You may, and it doesn't mean that you've squished her down too much. The way you express your Lilith may be in a quiet way. So maybe you're a potter and you make a lot of pots, you know, that it doesn't always have to be in that noisy, expressive, shouting way that Lilith comes out. It
yeah,
can,
so that doesn't mean that we've rejected her. It's just she may not be so loud.
yeah, she may be in Taurus, you know, that's not necessarily a loud Lilith.
Mm,
It's a sexy Lilith in Taurus, but you might be doing that behind the scenes. You may not want to tell everybody about that, you know, and also it may be private for you how you're expressing your Lilith. It doesn't have to be sort of some kind of public display, right? And
mm,
again, that's so it's different for different people.
mm. Okay, so the last section here I was thinking about is just to mention yourself, because this has been an archetype you've worked with for a long time. You
Hmm.
say it's a cosmic point I've been working with for more than a decade, testing it against the reality of my own life and the lives of friends and collaborators. So, yeah, any comment on that? And then I would love to talk to you a little bit about your own chart.
Well, yeah, I live in Oxford, and if you want to visit my website, it's the Oxford Astrologer. I live in Oxford, and we have had a local astrology group, and we were very interested. And we actually thought, oh, let's look at Lilith. And I don't like looking at the charts of murderers and stuff, but my group wanted to. And we looked and we were amazed that the most consistent thing was um was a strong Lilith. Was I think it was Lilith on the descendant or the ascendant. It was a really strong Lilith. Um, and so then we decided, okay, well, let's invite some people to come and talk to us about Lilith here. So we did.
Well, not kill us, right?
Not kill us. We're going to
Okay.
invite them to talk to us. So we had a little weekend thing here, and we invited some people. I called Dick van der Mark from Holland, and Lynn Bell came and talked about Lilith.
Nice.
And that was a long time ago now, actually. So that got me, and obviously I've always been interested because it's right on my descendant. So, whenever you have something that's on an angle as an astrologer, you look into it, right?
Mm.
Um, but she speaks to me. Like I said, I
Yeah.
know Lilith. I know the
Yeah.
people that I like, that I hang out with are Lilith people. And I realized that um, for me, also as a, how I relate to groups, how I relate to relationships is often in a very Lilith way, which is that I feel like an outsider. And I am an outsider quite often. I'm an outsider living in this country in some ways. And I grew up in a country where I was an outsider too. Um,
Did you grow up in Egypt?
yeah, yeah, I did. And I don't, when I say grow up, I mean I really mean it. My parents left when I was in my mid 30s. So they
Mm.
stayed there and I left. But yeah, as an outsider in a country which is very culturally in its attitude to women, very different.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so I had a lot of that kind of Lilith experience
Mm. Mm.
myself. So that's why I became really interested. And then I started to see it. And I had a really interesting client early on who was involved in an adulterous relationship. And it started under a Lilith transit. And it kind of ended under a Lilith transit too.
Okay. Mm.
And then I started to look at all of those love affairs, right? That they don't always work out. Sometimes they work out, by the way, in favor of the Lilith person. You can't predict that necessarily. But the ones
Okay.
that start off as a triangle.
Mm. Hmm.
And also
Yeah.
then I started to look at like friendships. You know how some people sometimes you have these triangular friendships.
Hmm.
Those also come under Lilith. So it's not all about
Okay.
sexual relations. It can be friendship relations.
Mm. And then what do you do? Like what do you do if you are caught up in that triangle? How can Lilith help you with that?
I don't think that there's one solution for every person. Okay. I think it's different for different people because sometimes when you're in that archetype, Lilith is going to win. And if you're the Lilith person, you're going to end up in the happy couple. Okay. I've seen that. And that's fine. That works out well. You end up being the most beloved person, the Lilith.
Okay.
But sometimes you have to let go, right?
Mm.
And not, you do have to let go. You have to leave the whole thing.
Mm.
Either way, it does end up being threes doesn't work. Okay.
Mm.
So you
Okay.
don't know which way that three isn't going to work, but the three is
Ah,
not going to work.
got it. Got it. Good
Um,
answer. Okay. That's a good thing to be guided by.
yeah. And also not to just assume that it's not that the outcast person is the permanently outcast person, because that's one
Mm.
of the things that's interesting about it is because it's dynamic. So it
Mm.
may be that it moves around. Right. And you may have found this if you would think about playgrounds, when you were a little child, especially for girls, right? so many girls have the best friend and the other friend, right?
Yeah.
And it moves around who the best friend is and who the other friend is. So many women are used to this three-way relationship
Actually, yeah.
that they're not realizing that the love affair is kind of a repeat of the playground that they've already learned from. They should have learned from by the time they're adults, you know. We get practice in that.
Mm, mm,
Um, and I would also say that the Lilith, that once, if it is a transit, once the transit is passed, and if the relationship may pass, you may lose interest in the whole
mm.
thing.
Okay.
You may not get sucked into it. You know, you may just think, "Wow, that was a transit. That
Mm,
was a part of my life, and now I'm awake. I woke up again." And
mm,
sometimes that's like a 9 month thing when Lilith is in a particular sign, different
mm.
particular part of the chart. Sometimes
Okay.
it's longer.
Okay. Ah, good stuff. Good stuff. So I have to confess to you that I've only been working with the true node, or the true Lilith.
That's fine.
Ah, okay. No judgment, right?
You know, I'm free and easy, you know, but I think I would start with green. I think it's more,
Yeah, I'm gonna look into that now. But
yeah,
that's why in your chart, for me, it is conjunct your sun,
yeah.
because I've been looking at that other Lilith. So, but I thought that was pretty significant as well, don't you? It's conjunct your
Yeah.
sun. It's like major
I'm
part of who you are.
yeah, it's about who I am.
Yeah,
I identify with Lilith.
yeah.
It's, and also, you know, taking the Via Lamia thing, it means that the Via Lamia runs across my descendant and to my son, essentially. And so it's not wide, but it's pretty wide. And so I'm interested in the other, in other
Mhm.
people who are othered. But yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, my mother also had Lilith conjunct the sun, but she had it
Mhm.
the mean Lilith conjunct the sun.
So
And
that's a repeat.
yeah, and my half sister as well, Lilith conjunct the sun.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, that's interesting. And then that was the mean Lilith or the true Lilith.
mean, but
Okay,
mine is
okay.
the true. So
That that
mine's the hidden one,
yeah, that's a
right?
hidden one. So I've only been looking at myself with the true as well.
Mm,
Well, I tried to look it up while I was reading your book and finding the Lamia, uh,
mhm.
but I think I need some surgical help to the precision there. But actually, I thought Lilith was at my north node
Yeah,
because it is in
yeah.
the true Lilith.
Well, interestingly enough, I'm just looking at yours, and it's Taurus and the beginning of Gemini, right? So that's
Yeah,
where Lamia runs.
so they're not so far apart.
Yeah, and I'm getting both off you actually.
Can you feel both?
Well, I'm just thinking, isn't it funny that we're having a conversation about Lilith? Right? That's
Yeah,
Gemini.
yeah.
But on the other hand, there's like this sort of strong, I think Lilith is really strong in certain signs. And I do think Scorpio Lilith is strong. And I think Taurus Lilith is strong as well.
Mm. I remember you wrote that. Yeah,
They
yeah.
seem to have this kind of, you have an affinity with that energy.
For me, with the North Node, it's part of my soul's path to be more liberated and to be more that because my background is in religion and I've left that. So that's how I made sense of it to see like there's the rebellious archetype there wanting me to
Mm,
move more in that direction and into my body, into sensuality.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's really important for anybody who's got Lilith and Taurus. You got to be sexy, mate. You know, you've got to really engage with your sexuality.
I'm just small talking with you here and getting some juicy punch from you, but I introduced you really quickly just as the author of this book, but this is a new thing, and you've been an astrologer for how long?
I've been an astrologer since probably the early 2000s, I suppose. Yeah, so 25 years or more than that. Yeah.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
And you are the Oxford astrologer. Oh, no, no, I shouldn't say that actually. We planned not to say that, but that's your website.
It's my
Yep,
website.
it's your
I mean,
website. So there
I,
are other astrologers in Oxford, but your website is the Oxford Astrologer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I yeah. And it's got there's other articles about Lilith on there and other stuff. So yeah, if you're interested in um exploring, there's loads and loads and loads of free articles on there.
Beautiful. That's so gracious of you to put it there
Mm.
so people
Mm.
can find resources.
Yeah, it
And
was gracious of me for the AI, right? I didn't know that would happen. Um,
I think we all feel like that. I've done so much work all of my life, and now this computer just comes and do it in
breaks
2 seconds.
Yeah, takes it away with no copyright. It's pretty.
Oh, okay. That's that part as well. Okay, yeah.
And you and I were talking earlier about the heat wave that we're.
Mm,
That's why I've had a bit of problems with the light here,
yeah.
and that heat wave is really serious and needs we need to. It's there's no time to wait now. With climate change,
Hmm.
that is not on the point of Lilith, but
Hmm.
it's on the
Yeah.
point where you and I are sitting in the heat right now.
Hmm. Mm. And maybe in the greater scheme of things, it is in a way on point with Lilith because there's also, politics and being there as a woman and having your say. That's, I mean, I don't know how it's all connected, but I could imagine that if we were more raw also in politics and didn't care so much for the outside power of it, then that would help the climate too.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that is just like direct with this is that Lilith is currently in Sagittarius and has been since November. So Lilith will go into Capricorn fairly soon. I'm looking forward to that. I think that will help. But Lilith in Sagittarius, you would expect that sounds like wildfire already, doesn't it? Like a
Mm,
wildfire in the woods
mm,
of Sagittarius. So let's hope that she's been, although she hasn't been involved with that, um, with the Barbeau's basket, she's not connected directly to that. She's still in a fire sign, you know.
mm.
Um, so she hasn't been in a helpful position unless you love fire.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, something is way too much.
Yeah, way too much fire. So I'm glad that she's moving into Earth fairly soon, and then
Mm.
she'll be there for 9 months.
And did you feel like true Lilith or the mean Lilith is that's different with the transits? You only track
I
mean
don't
Lilith.
mean Lilith really with the transits because
Okay.
otherwise it gets too confusing. But you can,
Okay.
you could track that. I wouldn't say you can't do that. Of course you can. Be quite interesting to do that and make it, if you were doing a comparison also of how that back and forth is changing things. But if you use the mean Lilith, okay, it is more straightforward because it moves like the sun and the moon in a
Uh-huh.
forward direction. The exact number of degrees, it's nine. It will move over 9 months in one sign. It's one of these things we should all just know in the same way that we, as astrologers, we just know where the sun is, right? And we know where the outer planets are at any time,
So
generally.
that's the point of yours that you want it to be as significant
You
as other major players. Yeah.
we should know where it is. We should, in the same way that we know where the nodes are,
Yeah.
right? And that they've changed signs. That's
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we feel the shift, don't we?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I'm
Um,
going to change my Lilith on my software and I'm gonna join you in the tracking.
yeah,
It
pay
sounds really good.
That's what I'm saying. Pay attention. And
Yeah.
let's all pray that this Lilith moving out of Sagittarius brings the temperature down a little bit.
Yeah. That would be awesome. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
So, Christina, do you have anything here in the end you wanna leave people with?
Yeah, I do. There is something I want to leave you with is
Yes.
you get to know your Lilith,
Yeah.
right? And you can be very practical about this, which means get to know what she's like in your sign and in the by sign and house. Get to know her, and then you can start playing around with how that energy works for you. And it's available to you, and it's not mysterious. right? This is not some mysterious um, unknown thing. It's a wonderful, powerful, creative, um, untamed energy that is inside you.
Mhm.
And it's life enhancing.
Amazing. Oh man, I want to buy that archetype. That sounds good.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
it's been great to meet you. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I have a bit of light and shade going on and a couple.
No, it's all good. It's all good, man. It's all good. We are liberated, rebellious women, so that's the least of it.
Yeah,
So thank you so much, Christina, for writing the book and taking your time to share some of it with us.
good.
And I highly recommend it, of course. And I'll link to your stuff into the book.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.